I'm Sandy McDaniel, and if you have joined me from the beginning of this series, you might have noticed that about every third lesson or so, I am considerably slimmer than I was the 3 lessons before. I have a new watch today, and this watch was something I bought for myself, and I couldn't wear it until I lost 30 pounds. Well, today's the day, so I'm sharing it with you. And if, as you go through the rest of this series with me, you turn on the computer and there's just a voice there, don't worry about it. That's just me being crazy. The thing is this. The topic today is being consistent. And had I not chosen to be consistent in the dietary plan that I followed, then I wouldn't be sitting here with a 30-pound weight loss. Now, first, the last lesson we talked about the effects of TV on children. We talked about that there are 2 reasons that I'm really, really, really concerned about this. One is that the effects of it on the children's brain, because brain development needs 3-dimensional learning, and anything that's on a screen is 2-dimensional learning. So the minute you start learning from a screen, the brain's having trouble developing and growing. The other part, and the part that we have to look at as a society, and we have to look at as parents, is that when our children are watching too much violence, then they themselves become more violent. Then they become numb to the fact that there is too much violence in the world. And they become a part of the problem, not a part of the solution. So I invited you to limit the amount of time that your children spend on the media being computers, TV, and video games, to 1 hour a day. Did you hear that right? 1 hour a day. That was hard, wasn't it? Of course it's hard, but it's really important. And if you didn't see that prior lesson, then you need to look at it, because there are reasons why we must stop our children watching so much TV, spending so much time with computer games and video games. That was the lesson last week. Now, and within the frame of this whole idea of watching television, I had a mom come to me who came for a private parent session. I do parent coaching, and she had a 6-year-old who watched 5 hours of TV a day. And I told her he could only watch 1. And he was hyperactive, he was aggressive, and he was non-focused, which are the things that happen when children watch too much TV. And so I said, 1 hour a day. She looked right straight at me, not kidding. And she said to me, what will I do with him for those other 4 hours? And what I told her was to go into Google and type in activities for a 6-year-old, activities for whatever. You can find all sorts of lists and all sorts of help on what do you do with kids so that they're interacting in their life. The main thing is that you have to be the person who says no more in terms of the media. Today's topic is about being consistent. It doesn't matter whether you use my system or anybody else's system. If you are not consistent, then not only will it not work, but you mess up your child's head. Okay, it won't work. When children defy you, when they push a boundary, they're asking one of 2 questions. Is this how I use power? And do you mean it? If you're not consistent, then they think they have more power than you do in a given moment. It's kind of like they become sharks in a shark frenzy, because you say, stop it, but you don't follow through. You're not consistent. Stop it, or you will lose your TV for a month. But then you don't do that, and they know you're not going to do that. And so then they accelerate their activity and their defiance, because the signal goes out. It's like a computer message. She has no power in this moment. He has no power in this moment. And so when you're not consistent, you tell your children that you don't know what you're doing. And they take off on a run of more behavior that just plain old doesn't work. The messes up your kid's head part. Let's say you don't care that they put the backpack by the front door on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But on Thursday, you're a psychopathic killer going through your house, ranting, raving, screaming, and yelling about the backpack being by the front door. It messes up your kid's head. Here was my childhood. Go to your room. Why? Because I said so. Well, that's productive. I wasn't down there saying to myself, well, I'm going to do that better because I didn't know what it was or that was. I didn't know what I'd done. And so what happens then when a child doesn't know? It's unpredictable. What happens is a child develops one of two personalities. People pleaser. I'm going to be so darling and so cute. I'm going to be so helpful, and I'm going to be so adorable that you won't get mad at me. Or the child who doesn't care ever if you get mad at them. You don't want either one of those. Both of those personalities are dysfunctional. And that's where a child goes when you create the lack of safety in a home by being inconsistent. Consistency is safety to a child. And that's why it's so important. You have to say what you mean what you say, and follow through. Say what you mean what you say, and follow through. You got to get your ducks in a row. If you're not consistent, it's because you've got too many things going on at once. You got to let some of them go. Maybe you're not a gourmet cook today. Maybe your house is a mess. It's a disaster area. And you're consistent with your child or your children, because that tells them that you're in charge, which creates safety. The whole game's about power. You must have more power than they do in every given moment. And key to that is that you are consistent. The second topic is you need to teach your children to take responsibility for their choices. I worked for 4 years, interesting time, with the at-risk kids in middle school and in high school in 4 different areas. I worked on different projects. What I saw, though, consistently in each project I worked in was those kids, the at-risk kids, never take responsibility for their choices. It's always about somebody else. It's always that they were the victim to something that happened. It was never their responsibility. So if you have a child who doesn't take responsibility for their choices, you need to work with that. At my age, I'm in my late 60s, if at my age, I've had my share of friends who, didn't meet you in the middle of the bridge because they wouldn't share responsibility for a problem. They wouldn't say, you would say, you know what, we had a problem here because I blah, blah, blah. And they would say, well, I da-da-da. And you meet in the bridge. And that's the place where you can resolve a problem and fix it. But if one person is forever carrying the responsibility for a two-person relationship, the bridge is going to break. It won't last. If you don't take responsibility for your choices, you're modeling that for your children. Don't expect them to, because they're not learning it from you. You need to teach your children to take responsibility for their choices by having a fair discipline system that works. I would recommend mine, of course. This way, a child can say, you know what, I messed up. But see, if you run in the room and you say, who ate the cookie? Only a crazy person would go, yeah, I did it. They're just volunteering to be slaughtered. Or if you walk up and you say, did you hit your sister? You think a crazy person is going to say yes? The child says, ooh, what sister? Because you're going to kill him. And the consistency of a discipline system where you do it in a different way, where there's a consequence for the choice, and then the consequence, after the consequence, you can talk about it, works better. It teaches the child to use behavior that's appropriate, not just to try to stay out of your way because you're angry, or not to upset you. It's very difficult to teach a child to take responsibility for their choices. I was working with a boy named Alex, and he's autistic. And I had taken Alex down to play with my grandchild, and the two boys were playing together, and it was time to go. So I said, Alex, we need to go home because it's almost your bedtime. And just at that precise moment, Scott, my son, walked in the door. Well, Scott is 6'5", and he's definitely a kid magnet, loves kids. So Alex looked at me and he said, Scott's home. So I knew that getting him to go right then was going to be a problem. I called his mom and we agreed that he could play with Scott for a half an hour, but then he needed to go to bed right when he got home. So Alex and I made that agreement, and we promised that he would do that. He played with Scott for a half an hour, and then we went back home. And as we walked back to their home, the dad was standing out on the front porch talking on the phone. So Alex ran over and clomped onto his dad, and nothing I had to say or tried to do worked. Nothing got him to let go of his dad. So I just said to his dad, he's all yours. The next day, I stopped by the house, and I said to the family, and they were all in the kitchen eating, and I said, I've got to go down to Newport today, which was a drive from where they were, and I've got to go down to Newport today, and I was thinking I'd take one of the children with me. And Matt jumped up and wrapped himself around my leg, and he said, I want to go to Newport. Please take me to Newport. I want to go with you. And I put my hand on the back of his head, and I said very gently, you know what, Matt? We have a problem because we have a broken promise between us. Last night you promised that if you stayed and talked to Scott, or stayed and played with Scott for a half an hour, that you would come home and go right to bed. And you broke that promise. So you won't be going to Newport with me today. Now, Matt, you have two choices. I really like two choices because it tells your child, bottom line, I'm done. Matt, you have two choices. You can scream and yell and melt down. Somebody will peel you off my leg, and you won't be going to Newport with me. Or you can take a breath, back up, understand that this is about a bad choice. Nobody's mad at you. It's just not acceptable not to keep your promise. And go on with what you are doing. It's time to choose, Matt. Matt took a breath, stepped back, turned around, and went back to what he was doing. I think there were 4 adults in the room at the time. Everybody started to cry, including me. It had taken a full year to get Matt to own a problem and not melt down and go psycho because of it. My point would be, if Matt can do it, then your child certainly can. It takes some training. It takes you not coming in like a spear or a hammer or a jackhammer, so you scare your child so much that they say, no, what cookie? I didn't do it. It takes some communication. It takes slowing down from the chaos and inviting your child to take responsibility for the choice, and then rewarding them for doing so with a high five or a hug. So in the case, let's say your child says, yeah, I did, and you say, okay, there's a consequence for that. And the child responds to the consequence in a positive way. Then at dinner that night, you say to your husband, wife, the person who wasn't there, okay, you say, guess what Chris did today? And you tell the story. And the father or the other person says, high five. Now the child got rewarded for doing something positive. You see, one of the things with negative behavior with children is if a child's getting a lot of attention for negative behavior, then they pretty much stay there because they need the attention. If you want them to switch over to positive attention, you've got to give them some. Because if you're giving them positive attention, then they'll switch over to here. So you have to acknowledge when a child begins to change. And then the child will increase that desire or intent to change. If you don't take responsibility for your choices when you make a mistake, and I'm reminding you of this, I already said it, then your children won't either. So you need to clean up your act first. And if you need help with that, my book, Leave Your Baggage at the Door, would be a good selection for you to read at this time. It's a lot of work remembering all these things. Be consistent. Teach your children to take responsibility for their choices. 1 hour of media time. Remember how you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. 1 day at a time. 1 lesson at a time. Each time that you're with me, pay attention. Do the homework. And then improve a little at a time. But don't be hard on yourself. Your homework is to see if you can have 1 day of being consistent, where you're consistent all the way through the day. And then notice how it's different. Notice how you feel, how much better you feel at the end of the day. And then how about 1 day follow another and build on that. It's really important for your children's growth and development, for their sense of safety, for their learning how to use power in an appropriate way, that you are consistent. Mean what you say what you mean, follow through. Have a beautiful day. This is Sandy McDaniel.